Good morning, everyone. So my name is, hi Barry, you're unmuted, but I did see the good morning right there. I just wanted to give 1 or 2 more minutes for more people to enter until we formally start. But I'm so appreciative of the fact that you're joining me today, that you chose my workshop. So thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Juan. So we have Esther, we have Juan, Bettina, Maciel, Ivan, Sassy Maat, Hillary, and VP, a higher up. So again, my name is Rhonda Harrison. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to share with you my workshop, Promoting Lifelong Learning while Identifying and Pursuing Career Pathways. Just to introduce myself to you a little bit, I do have a background in the nonprofit arena, advising adult learners who are also job seekers. For the past 10 years, though I've been working with college students who came to college as a way to access the workforce. So that's just a little bit about me. And I wanted to share today's agenda with you. For those of you who logged on as Zoom, or iPhone, you might want to change your name just so that we can greet you, talk to you, who know who you are. But the agenda that I have prepared for today is that I just want to start with kind of discussing our own career discovery process. Then I wanted to share a definition of career readiness, talk through some activities for students to pursue their own career interests, possible pathways into a career. And then the last 15 minutes, we could do a little bit of debriefing. And I do have a resource, which includes this PowerPoint that Sid is going to drop in the chat for me, okay? So hopefully we could spend maybe about 15 minutes in each section, because I know that you guys have a hard out, so that you can get to the next workshop. So let's just talk about how we discovered, our career paths. How did your teachers prepare you for work? And what were you told about the ways you could get into your career? So I'll break the ice a little bit by sharing first. When I was in high school, both my parents and my teachers told me to go to college as the way to enter into a career, the way to get a job. No other career entry options were presented. And career readiness wasn't a term yet. Depending on what generation you're from, it wasn't a thing. My teachers warned us that no one would help us in college because we had to be adults, but there was an implicit promise that all I had to do was graduate in order to get a good job and start my career. So I'd like to know what messages did other people receive? Sassy,
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone.
good morning.
I, I too come from a generation where college was it. College was the baseline. First generation, first in my family to go to college. But my parents also owned like many Caribbean families do, owned a family business, and so that could have been an option, but it wasn't. They didn't present it as an option either. It was go to college. But then
Mhm.
when I got into college, my choice of major was really not. I was told I was, would not find a career. My major was English and creative writing, and so it was disapproved of,
Mm,
as it were, not just by family, but by the community at large. Why don't you study business? You know what I mean?
oh
Well,
yeah.
what is writing going to do?
Hmm.
So in fact, it wasn't until graduate school that I was able to discover real career options for myself, and um, combining a sense of things that I loved, which was the English language and traveling. And so my my therapist at the time suggested getting certified in ESL, and that
Ah,
so not family, not friends, but my therapist and
thank God for
graduate
therapy.
and
Okay.
graduate school put me on the path into ESL education.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me
So
share.
you're welcome. So Barry, I also saw that you were the first to unmute. What were you going to say something?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to share my story. My grandparents were immigrants from Russia and Poland, and they met actually in my paternal grandparents met in a English speaking in the ESL class, and and my father was the first in the family to graduate to graduate with a degree. So I was very lucky, I think, because religion was held up on a pedestal. And did I say religion?
Yes.
I, I'm not religion. I meant education was
Okay.
held up on a pedestal.
Education was the religion. Okay. I hear
Yes,
you.
yes, exactly. And so to me, it was just a natural thing, and it was very lucky. I mean, I went to school, and it opened up a lot of doors. I think because I had a degree. But
Mhm.
my father was an engineer, and he felt that my being a psychology major was not really an education, and so I didn't feel like I had to prove myself, and I just went towards the liberal arts where I was weaker. I was stronger in the STEM sciences than
Mhm.
math, the but it was tough for my brother because I had a brother who couldn't make it, and he was a musician, and he really couldn't make it. So it was really very difficult on him, and he really never had a life. It was very sad.
Ah, okay. So some common themes. It seems like for the three of us, education was held up as the way out, even though Sassy's, parents had a business, business is a way out. Um, but Esther, what's your story?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My story is, a little bit different from Yale. So I grew outside the United States, in Nigeria, and in my family, they expect the children to learn from our parents that school is good. So my father got his bachelor's in English, and mom went to a teacher training school. So they expected us to, go to college, and I had to try. They didn't talk to me a lot about going to college, but whenever we have like big family dinner, so my older cousins will be asking me like, "What did you score in this test?" I'm like, I just came to eat. So why are these people intimidating me and asking me scores about? No, I just want to eat. I want to have the appetite to eat. So that made me like, I need to do what my cousins and my brother, what they're planning to do. And I didn't have any course in mind, and I decided to study banking. Dad was an educator, a school principal. Mom was also assistant principal in the primary school. So, the kids, we said, oh, we are going a different way. We are going a different way. My senior brother studied medicine, and I studied banking. I should be working in the bank
Mhm.
abroad because bankers in Nigeria are very rich. So when I was invited to the US, I came in and I tried to follow the route of what I did in bachelor's, which was banking, but I couldn't get in. So my aunt, who was a tutor in Hostos College, took me to her head of department and said, "This is my niece." And she wants to work here. And the head of department was like, "Are you this woman's niece? Okay, so you can start work." That's how they were employing in the 2000, around that time. That's when so they employ you according to, like, if a friend or relative have been doing well in the company, and that way, I started. And then after some time, I applied, in a GED program to teach the GED. Of course, English, wasn't that I was an English tutor, so it wasn't a problem. But when they asked me the question, can you teach all the subjects like mathematics? I'm like, do you know? I answered yes, but I ran to the library, to Barnes and Nobles, to familiarize myself with the math content. And I'm
Okay.
grateful. Like today, math is my main thing, math and science, and also my family, because I wasn't too good in the high school. I didn't pay attention to math, but I love literature. So they keep asking me, tell us the subject that you say that you are now teaching. Yeah, so it's like the teaching thing runs in our family, so we try to escape it, but I came back to it.
Okay. So, the interesting thing is that all of us kind of discovered our career paths in different ways. Um, in my story, none of my high school teachers really talked to me about actual work or actual jobs. But lo and behold, I've been working after I went to college right from high school, and lo and behold, I've been working ever since I graduated for college. So the name of this workshop is Promoting Lifelong Learning while identifying and pursuing career pathways. So I just want to let you know that, in my opinion, if you are teaching your students how to read better, how to write better, how to calculate, all of those basic academic skills, you are making them career ready. Okay. So what I would like to do throughout the rest of this workshop is really just make the implicit explicit, and to just draw out a little bit what you already do, because all of you as educators, you're already making your students career ready. Okay. Um, we're just going to be a little bit more intentional about that. So I wanted to show you a definition of career readiness. So just so that we're all working with the same vocabulary here. So there's an organization called the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, right? And so they have career readiness is a foundation from which to demonstrate required core competencies that broadly prepare the college educated for success in the workplace and lifelong career management, right? So I paraphrase that a little bit. My paraphrase is that it's the skill sets that employers want you to have when you start work. And employers would expect educators to graduate a career-ready workforce. So initially, what do you think about NACE's definition and the way that I paraphrased it? What comes to mind?
Oh, it's only for college educated, right? In the first definition.
True. Well, that in keeping, I guess, with their mission, the organization. What else? Any other thoughts? Bettina? Oh, Bettina, you're muted. There you go. Oh. You kind of keep going back and forth.
I'm trying.
All right, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, speak now.
Well, okay, the first definition from the National Association of College and Employers, of course, is dealing strictly with college educated people. My students who are, I teach in the adult education program, of course, and my students are mainly immigrants, and some of them will go on to college, but many of them won't. And I think it's very important to be able to prepare my students who will not have the opportunity to go on to college. Many of them have families they have to support, to be able to give them skills that they can use to have a successful career, successful jobs without having a college education.
Absolutely. Well, actually, so I'm actually going to show you NACE's, how they actually describe career readiness, like what are the components in their mind that make up college readiness, career readiness. And so let's see how much of what they say actually requires a degree. But before I move on, any other thoughts? Okay. So this is what NACE says are the career readiness skill sets. So first, I just want you to take a look. And I guess the question is, do you agree or disagree with NACE? Is there anything missing? How would you define each of those terms? So we have career and self-development, communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, leadership, teamwork, professionalism, and technology.
I think it's a great list.
Is that Andy?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's very foundational. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff that I think people can try to teach, depending on the specific industry that the student wants to get into. But I think that this is perfect in terms of what I like to call like the floor of education, like the minimum requirements that people should be learning for a career or life, really, in general.
Well, I guess a follow-up question is, even though this definition was is thrown out there by NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, would you all agree that it's something that these are skills that you can help to build in your students even if they don't go to college?
Certainly.
I would say yes. To
Okay.
Bettina's point, there's a lot of, in our program, we have a lot of immigrant ESOL students. But I think that these are very important skills that should be infused into the classroom activities.
Mhm. Do we have any areas that are a little fuzzy for people? Like career and self-development. What does that mean to you all? Because all of us could walk away with these skill sets and have different opinions of what they actually mean.
I would say career and self-development include teaching students the ability to know how to like develop themselves personally in terms of learning skills to be able to be productive individuals, you know, whether that's health, fitness, mental health. And then in terms of career, it's teaching students the ability to know how to like negotiate a higher salary, know how to determine whether the job they're in is a fit for them, know how to write a resume, write a cover letter, go to an interview, things of that nature.
Okay. I think that for me, one of the keys to career and self-development is really is also the idea of being proactive. That you're not my generation, or at least I was taught that, oh, you graduate and rather than me having to apply for a job, an employer would apply for me. He would knock on my door. But I think that the idea of career and self-development is always being aware of what is going on in your field and always moving forward, always being proactive. For communication, I would think that that includes everything, right? Written communication, the way you speak, even your body language. Communicating effectively so that the message is received and understood. What do people think about critical thinking? Because that I have a friend that we've been wrestling over that one for years.
Well, I certainly think that's extremely important, especially with the development of all the new technologies. There are so many scams to which our students who may have limited the English skills can fall victim to. And I think it's extremely important to be able to teach students how to try to see beyond what is simply presented and to understand if there are any underlying motives.
That's a really good example. My students are always getting emails telling them that there's a job waiting for them. You know, just give me your contact information and we'll set you to work, right? So the way that NACE would describe critical thinking is to be able to identify and respond to needs based on an understanding of the situation and a logical analysis of the relevant information. It's a lot right there, but it's pretty good.
I'll add something. So basically, I think it's really important.
Oh, Shayla, you muted yourself like mid-sentence.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So I think critical thinking is one of the best skills that we can teach in our classes for our immigrants, because some of our students said, oh, in my country, I was not allowed to express myself. It was offensive. It was something that, so when they come to the United States, so we teach them, no, here, your voice is important. You can talk, you can answer, you can make your own judgment. So I think critical thinking is one of the most important skills we can teach in our classes.
But for your students, the way you said it, it seems like critical thinking is also tied to communication. You're developing both.
Yeah, at the same time, you're right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Equity and inclusion. I would describe that as just embracing diversity. We live in one of the most diverse cities in the world. Many of you teach immigrants. So it's important that we just learn how to embrace and celebrate diversity. Leadership and teamwork having to do with being able to utilize your strengths and pull upon the strengths of the team to achieve, the organizational objectives, which is also part of professionalism, at least the way that NACE might describe it. Any thoughts? Part of professionalism is knowing your work environment and being able to work in the interests of the organization. And I think that Bettina talked about technology, that the technology is just ever changing, ever growing. So let's talk about, maybe now that we have these 8 categories in mind, I want to talk a little bit about maybe some activities, maybe brainstorm some ways that all of you could just make these competencies a little bit more explicit as you go about teaching your students. So some core competencies: written communication, verbal communication, teamwork, leadership, but almost all of them except the technology. All of them can be taught through different types of journaling and writing exercises. There's also the individual and the class resume. So before I unpack that a little bit more, I know that as educators, I'm sure that many of you already use journaling and writing exercises. So would any of you want to share, what you're already doing with your students and how maybe you could make it a little bit more explicit? How you can incorporate the career readiness in the core competencies and help people to discover different career entry points?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, as educators, I'm sure that many of you already use some sort of writing exercises with your students. Before I kind of unpack my thoughts, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share how you already use those exercises to build those core competencies and to show people different career entry points. I mean, one thing is that simply depending on the student's skill level, students can write an essay about their career, right? Or write about, for those people who have not worked before, they can either write about a job or maybe a volunteer job that they've had if they have very little or no work experience, or they can also write about a skill that they have, you know, hair braiding, sewing, fixing cars, public speaking, taking care of, you know, any sort of skill, because that might be a way for you and the student to identify a skill that they have. Some of your students might be natural leaders. Bettina, I thought you wanted to say something. No?
I'm listening, thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In our program, we implemented like an action plan type of activity with them, where we meet with them and figure out what work experiences they've had, what current experiences they have, and what type of job or career they're looking to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And then figuring out what type of social services they need that are sort of barriers for them at the moment to get to the career that they desire. And we try to like scaffold it for them to figure out like what steps they need to take to get to where they want to.
When you talk about action plan, what does that look like? Is that a writing exercise, or is that a contract?
So we have a survey where we just have a conversation with them individually.
Mm-hmm.
And the action plan is sort of like a contract. We don't really have them sign it, but it is their thoughts, it's their experiences, their skills, where they think skills that they lack that they want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of just spells out short-term and long-term goals that they want to use to accomplish.
Is that a one and done? Like, oh, you meet with the student one time, do the action plan, and then you start execution?
Ideally, you should meet with them twice to follow up and see what progress they've made with the goals that they've set.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that I find about, yeah.
No, I was gonna say the student keeps coming back, then you kind of want to do this twice a year.
Oh, okay. Because one of the things that I find about writing is that writing is a process that gives people time to think and time to process. At least that does for me. But Sassy, what were you gonna say?
Well, like Andy, we too have our students complete we call it a career and education plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that has questions about, okay, self-knowledge, like what do I know about myself? What are personal activities that I enjoy, educational activities, so academic activities, and what am, work, what are my preferences? What am I good at? What do I need to strengthen? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What steps do I need to take to strengthen those areas? And part of that is also writing about their school experiences and what they acquired there, or not even just school, but community experiences and what skills they acquired there. But apart from that, one of the things that we do in all of our classes, whether it is ESL class, whether it's ABE class, HSE class, there's always a text, a thematic text that the students read on a regular basis and respond to on a regular basis. Not a textbook, but for example, we have a job readiness training for serve safe food handler, right? For English language learners. And part of what they do is they read a book written by a chef, Anthony Bourdain, called Kitchen Confidential, right? So they're reading that text on a regular basis and responding in their little notebook, right, on a regular basis. And then the teacher reads it, not for correcting. So how the teacher reads is it different. The teacher doesn't read it to correct the grammar, correct the spelling. The teacher simply responds to it, responds to the ideas, right? And so there is a written communication back and forth on a weekly basis. And so that, because for so many of our learners, there's anxiety about writing. Oh my, English isn't so good. I'm not a very good writer. So there's all this anxiety. So removing that, it's this sentence is wrong, the structure is wrong, just removing that, and it becomes communication back and forth between the teacher and the student regularly every week. That definitely builds their confidence and gets them just comfortable with writing.
And that actually, that can also be a shared journal where students, swap journals and respond to one another. It also feeds into the idea, I mean, all of us know what an individual resume is. My experience in workforce development is that oftentimes a job seeker would work with a trainer or a job developer who would do their resume for them. It might be something that a student do in class, and for those students who are entry level, there is a project, maybe an icebreaker or a team project that can be done called the class resume, where on the board, like everybody contributes, well, I volunteered here, I have this skill, I did this for a while, and you really get to leverage the experience of the class, which can also build teamwork and leadership. But before I go on, Valentina had something to say. Hey, Valentina. You had your hand up.
Good morning. Yes, so I just wanted to share that we do both formal and informal assessment, like you said, and I'm coming myself from like more than 20 years of teaching experience from the classroom, and I'm in the office environment. Basically, I am the intake advisor for New York Public Library. So when I do the intake already from the registration point, I'm already doing informal assessment, like you said, asking my students questions like, where are you from? What was your degree? What were your career skills? And kind of acknowledging that now you're in this country and what do you want to do here? Kind of helping them to establish that bridge from the past to the present and what are their career paths. And already asking them the same question like you mentioned before. Basically, it might be not your degree, it might be not your past career experience, but maybe what are your interests? What are your hobbies? And just jotting it down on the student's profile, that helps me in the future to identify students. When I hear of some job openings or trainings in this field, I notify students like, hey, remember you said you like to do these things, and here's a training, maybe you might want to look into that. So that's kind of like the intake process. And then during the semester, as part of my job is the case management, I do the ongoing assessment. So it's not like formal writing, like you're saying, students don't write to me because I'm not in the classroom, but on a weekly basis, when I send out emails about different job opportunities and trainings and community events going on in our borough or in the city, this helps me also to identify the students who are seeking more information about specific career or trainings. So, and also for formal assessment, we have Viola classes that are funded by special funding, and for them we use the CUNY Career Kit assessment, which is exactly like you said, the goal setting. So this is more like official writing, and I highly recommend this resource It's available online, CUNY Career Kit. And there is the goal setting for students, basically assessing what they want, what they already did, what they're already doing, and what are these, their goals to achieve in the future. And that helps me to look at that during the semester to help them, identify the places where they can reach out and go further.
Okay. Well, thank you for the resource. Shout out to CUNY Career Kit. I'm wondering, all of you might want to think about whether there's a place for teachers and case managers to collaborate a little bit more closely. I mean, I wonder whether the teachers see the job action plan or the assessments that the case managers do. But what I have on the screen loops back to also what Sassy said about just raising a student's awareness through feedback and developing a student's communication skills while teaching them a little bit about, embracing diversity. So just some examples. If a student has good writing skills, sometimes the English teachers that I work with will say, you wrote that really well, or you have really good writing skills, period. What I would just say is that turn that period into a comma. You have really good writing skills, and that's a skill that's required in the job market. Okay, so keep that up. If you teach bilingual or multilingual students, let them know that they have unique and marketable skills. What I have noticed about my immigrant students is that they have often been teased because of their accents. And by the time they get to me, and again, I work on the college level, they're almost embarrassed about the fact that they speak another language rather than seeing it as a skill, and something to be developed and cherished. On the flip side, encouraging monolingual English speakers to learn another language, including sign language, that's a really, that would be really helpful to them, both for their own personal enrichment, right? And it makes them more marketable. But then there's also those digital literacy skills. COVID, just for those people who were not all that excited about technology or teaching online, COVID kind of changed the game for us. So, and a lot of that is here to stay. So some of the ways that we can help our students develop their digital literacy. I have a lot of difficulty. I urge my students to check their emails on a regular basis. I'm wondering how many of you can identify with what's on the screen. Can they respond professionally? Can they actually attach homework to it or another document to an email and submit? What about document storage and retrieval? Barry, you're shaking your head. Is that because, well, tell me, what do you think? What's going on?
I'm agreeing with all of that. These are all necessary skills to be successful.
Is your classroom mostly in person? Is it digital? How do your students like just transmit information back and forth? That's not just for Barry, it's for everyone.
Well, my class is an in-person class, and the program with which I'm affiliated has special classes to develop technological skills.
Mm-hmm. So when your students give you homework, do they just write it and hand it to you?
Mostly we discuss it,
Mm-hmm.
homework, rather than it being written. My students all have jobs, that they're very busy, and they all have families, and they are very concerned about developing their oral communication skills. For a lot of what you said, they are embarrassed about their accent, and also they feel that if they can develop their speaking ability, it will help them to get better jobs if people can understand them more easily. So we spend a lot of time on that. We do reading aloud. The class I have now is a class for students who want to get their GED. And I
Mhm.
certainly, this is the first time I've ever taught this. I've taught the more advanced classes and so forth, but the students are very concerned about their oral skills.
Right, right. I guess the only I remember back in the day, I used to have a typewriter with the red and black typewriter ribbon. And you could go into an office back in the day and see mostly typewriters sitting on desks. But now, no matter what job you do, there's always a computer or some sort of digital interaction that people have to have. So I guess I have a question about whether digital literacy should just be taught by one teacher in one section of the program. That maybe there's a way to incorporate it a little bit more broadly. Not that you become the digital education teacher, but that, you know, a little bit of that be sprinkled into every classroom. But Esther had her hand up.
Well, yeah. Yes, for my class, like you said, during the pandemic, that period was kind of a game changer because I was teaching the HSE then, so I was mainly teaching math, which is a subject that challenged our students. So they were able to a lot of them upload their assignments in Google Classroom. Then some of them I didn't see them. It could be like they don't have the technology. And one day I was teaching online when one of my students disappeared, and I was so worried. And so later she had to email me that where she was speaking from in the basement, they don't have good internet access. So that bothered me during that pandemic. But now we are in person, and so students, the HSC students I'm teaching, we can correspond by emails. And sometimes when I teach science, we can do like in-class, research. Most of our students don't know the power of the smartphones that we have. They don't know, so we go on the internet, everybody has it, so we research, come up with answers immediately, and groups we present before we close for that day, so everybody gets involved. Yeah.
So thank you for that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move on a little bit and talk about professionalism in the classroom. So before the pandemic, I think that a lot of professionalism, the way that you could teach that is just through the way you manage your classroom. You privately point out unprofessional behavior. Like before the pandemic, I used to have students who put their heads on the desk, who would refuse to participate, who would spend 20 minutes in the bathroom, stuff like that, and publicly praise professional behavior, like good attendance, regular homework submission, I work on a team with a math and an English teacher, and we've developed like a little pod nod, just a little, not a certificate, but just a little written acknowledgement of their leadership in the class, you know, and we give that out in front of the class. People, Bettina, this might be good for you, for students to do some sort of informational interview. Depending on the student's level of experience, some people might feel comfortable, you know, just cold calling a professional and setting up an informational interview. Since you work with students who are much more shy about their oral skills, this is something that could be done. You could either assign an assignment where they interview someone in the family, or they could interview one another in the classroom, you know? And also just a generational thing. One day I put what I thought was a number sign on the blackboard, and the student asked me about where he could find the hashtag. So I think that generational diversity is also something that we're looking at in the classroom.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And many of you teach civics, you know, in your classrooms. Hey. Depending on whether or not you could do field trips with your students, it seems to me like somebody is always running for office all the time now. I don't remember it always being like that, but students can attend a candidates forum. They could do research about a policy. And remember, politics is a career option. They could either run for office. We do have immigrants who are in office, or there are jobs around an elected official, right? Working in their offices, working for their campaigns. That is like a real career. And last but not least, let's not forget, we're working in one of the greatest cities of the world, right? So let's design assignments using New York City. We can develop a student's critical thinking skills, help them to acknowledge and embrace diversity and lifelong learning. You know, I have some immigrant students who have never been to a museum, at least in the United States. We also have, you know, the library, the public library has a career and college division now. Tours, all sorts of things. It's a little bit difficult for me to see the chat, but I see that someone did, Marin wrote in the chat. In my experience with GED students, I've observed that once the students are comfortable within the classroom community, then they're more willing to use technology to submit their assignments. So confidence building. Okay, thank you, Marin. Appreciate that. Any thoughts about just leveraging New York City? Do any of you do that as a part of your teaching?
When I taught ESL, that would be part of what I would do. I mean, it's, as you say, we are living in this marvelous, exciting city. However, my GED students are so concentrated on being able to pass the test that they just want to concentrate on that.
I'm wondering, does anyone have any tips that they could share with how we could leverage New York City to help students pass the GED? I mean, I have a human services student that I'm in one of my classes. So she went to the New York Historical Society and saw an exhibit having to do with the history of the Children's Aid Society, which has a history, you know, which is a social services organization that she might one day apply to and actually find a job in. The New York Public Library hosted a teen career fair just last week for students for teens aged 13 through 18. So I don't have anything off the top of my head, but if anybody else has a way that they might leverage New York City to teach some of the subjects that would be on the GED, hey, drop it in the chat. Or raise your mechanical hand.
It's Valentina again. Yeah, I would say a lot of museums, like for example, Staten Island Children's Museum, Brooklyn Museum, they have Con Ed and other organizations sponsored like Science Saturday or science events. And this is applicable to elementary, middle school, and high school programs. So that's something that can be useful, like a tour to the local museum.
Aha, because they have science events there. Well, we also have science museums. So, hey, there's an option. Thanks, Valentina. But I do, before we're winding down on time, so I do want to spend a couple of minutes. We all know, many of us came through college as a viable way to enter into a career. But there are other ways that people decide to access the workforce. One way is just an old-fashioned vocational or trade school. So a couple of weeks ago on April 24th, the New Yorker had a headline called "The Great Electrician Shortage." I didn't know we had a shortage, but apparently that's a thing. And they make more money than I do. So that is a viable, you know, pathway for those students who are not going to go to college. Every now and again, I also have students who will just pop up and say, Ms. Harrison, you know, I really appreciate what you've done for me here in college, but I'm going to drop out and I'm going into the military. There are also workforce development organizations. Some of you work for those workforce development agencies, nonprofits and governmental providers that teach people how to apply for jobs. They help people with resumes, interviewing skills, applications, and the like. I suspect that that's what, Valentina, that's probably what you do at your organization. You work for a workforce development organization? Or maybe Andy?
I work at we have a full spectrum of adult education. I'm specifically the counselor, so I try to do as much career training as possible. But I was thinking about what you mentioned earlier about trying to incorporate this as much as possible into the classroom. So one of the things we're doing is figuring out how to standardize a curriculum in our program to have pathways. So yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of assessments. I've only been in this position for about 2 or 3 months now. So we've been
congrats.
Sort of just figuring out what the needs are to determine which direction to help the students go in.
Okay. Ivan, you
And
have
let
your
me,
hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the uh, your seminar today. So I have both online and in-person classes, and I try to incorporate technology, specifically Google Classroom with the students and some Google applications to get them ready with technology and those types of applications so they can be workforce ready, whether it's teaching a language or citizenship. I also try to incorporate that so they can practice that and learn that
Okay,
so they
Google.
can be ready, get on the resume.
Thank you. Google Careers. I forgot about them. Okay. Valentina, you had your hand up?
yes, so I just wanted to jump in again. So yes, I work for the New Public Library. So we actually have this career college department that we have like tours, virtual tours or in person with the students. We also work closely with the Workforce One, which has offices in every borough. So I highly recommend. And they're very helpful with not only employing the students, but also offering such free services as resume writing, interview preparation, and different trainings. And believe it or not, weekly on Fridays, I get emails from every borough, and some jobs are so peculiar that I never heard about it. And that helps me help my students even more because looking at their interests and hobbies or their background, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting job. I never thought that this job even was ever on the market. And that helps me unite the students with these different organizations. Also, we work closely with the Jewish JCC of Staten Island, and they have offices in the city in Brooklyn, and Catholic Charities, because all of them offer different trainings and career paths. So knowing about their trainings, their job fairs, or any career events, just spreading the information and referring students to specific trainings that really helps to establish this community organizations networks and greatly helps our students to see this career paths.
Well, the beautiful thing about the New York Public Library is that all you need is a library card to access the services. So, hey, the New York Public Library has grown and developed far beyond what it was when I was a kid. You want to drop a link in the chat to the career resources, feel free. But the one thing that I just did want to touch upon is that some students you might be able to help your students to evaluate what a good job actually looks like. Because there are some people who just get a job and they grow with that job and they're able to develop the stable career that they want with that particular job. When they're taking, helping them evaluate, especially for immigrants who don't necessarily know how everything or how the job market is set up in the United States. Vacation days, sick days, is it union, stuff like that. People, when I was younger, people used to make fun of McDonald's, but McDonald's has a hamburger university. There are some unionized positions that offer their students workforce development as a way to get a leg up, on the economic ladder. So sometimes, that's the way to go for some of your students. Any thoughts that people have before I move on a little bit? Oh, Bettina, unmute.
I would like to know where Valentina works, where there are so many wonderful resources available.
Okay, so I work for New York Public Library, but like I mentioned, we have connections with the other organizations like Catholic Charities, Jewish Community Center, and of course, New York Public Library. Career Center, and Workforce One. So these are the main parties that we established that networking.
You work for the New York Public Libraries?
Yes.
Where, in what location? Where are you?
So I'm in Staten Island and also Manhattan.
Ooh.
In Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay.
And we do have in-person and online classes. So I kind of do both worlds. Like you mentioned before, it becomes more difficult to work with technology, especially with immigrants. But we take a lot of responsibility for introducing them to technology slowly. Like even if it's in-person class, we still kind of encourage them simple things like you mentioned before, checking your email on a regular basis, setting up the voicemail. A lot of immigrants don't know how to set up their voicemail. So when we contact them, we can leave a voicemail. I train my students a lot to set up the calendar reminder for online classes, because a lot of them just simply tell me the truth. Oh, I forgot about the class. So such a technology little thing as setting up the calendar reminder in their own phones, that makes a miracle for them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much. So I think we only have about maybe a little bit less than 10 minutes before we need to wrap it up. So I just wanted to debrief. By the time an adult learner leaves you, right, they will be ready for the workforce. So what do you think, what do you want them to know about career readiness, the ways to get into the workforce, and how you will implement those ideas in your classes? What do you want them to know about career readiness, the ways to get into the workforce, and how you'll implement that in your classes? Thanks, Valentina, for the link.
I would say yesterday I learned, I was on another workshop and I learned this term, digital resiliency, which was a cool term. I've been learning digital literacy skills and trying to incorporate it in my own work. But I think being digitally resilient means understanding that the students may have issues with technology or being literate with technology, or that we as teachers or as educators may have not been able to incorporate it in our own work, but being able to like push past that. And you can teach digital things in any aspect. I know one of our teachers, as small as using WhatsApp, you know, it's a digital skill. So there's a lot of different types of digital things that we can be incorporating, even while we're still trying to get them to obviously either learn English in our ESOL programs or pass the GED exam and the GED programs, but trying to you know, get past our own fears of technology. I prefer in-person classes, but I know the value of technology when it comes to employment purposes. So I think in trying to incorporate it as much as possible wherever we can in our lessons.
Thank you. So we have Sassy and then followed by Esther.
One of the takeaways that I want all students to have is to never stop learning, and that learning doesn't necessarily mean, or it can, but it doesn't necessarily mean taking another class, right? They could learn on the job, you know, and when they are in the workplace, that you know, I guess going back to what you said about being proactive, right? So that they could advocate for themselves and ask when they don't know. So, hey, being comfortable with going to their supervisor and saying, hey, I would like to learn this. You know, this other person, I would like to learn this. How can I, you know, what are the options for me or the opportunities for me? Going to their coworkers, you know, and learning from their coworkers, but to never stop learning, and that lifelong learning will enable them to continue to grow in their career, right?
Okay, thank you. So Esther, we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to give you the last word. And then I think my co-host Sid is going to drop the evaluation and this PowerPoint into the chat so that you could have it for yourself. So Esther, wrap this up. Take us home.
Okay, so for me, for the career pathway, when I talk to my GD students, I tell them first of all, when you pass and have that certification, make use of it. Some of them get too excited that in the next 4 years, they haven't gone to college, they haven't used it. I tell them present it to your employer. About jobs, I tell them to think about the jobs they are doing. These days, America is talking about inflation, not only talking, foodstuffs have gone up. Now, if you choose something to do, please research it and know how much you get paid. Go to glassdoor.com and find out how much it is. I have read articles where our young people get their rent paid up by their parents. This is not fair. And so I tell them to do that. Also, one of my takeaways will be like to remind students, as little as it is, to check their phones, make sure you set up your voicemail very well, and also check your emails. Thank you.
Thank you. So Sid has already dropped some information in the chat. So I didn't want to just mention names of organizations and then not give you any resources. So everything that we've covered on the screen has been provided to you in the chat, plus, some resources. I talked about college. I talked about trade schools. We talked about the military. We talked about workforce development. We talked about working your way up the career ladder. So these slides, rather than me going over them, they're actually in the PowerPoint so that you could look up some of the resources that I provided for you. Sid, where are we on time right now? 1 minute?
Yep, 1 minute.
Okay, so I just want to thank Sid for being my co-host. I want to thank all of you for having chosen my workshop to come to, because you could have gone elsewhere. I really appreciate it. So all of you just enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the panels that are coming up. Thank you.
So thank you so much. The link says invalid. I'm trying to fill the survey, but it's not coming up. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if you want to take my email, if anyone is having difficulty, I can email